Welcome back. My favorite part when I'm sitting down with another guest on Adventures and Adversity. This is a podcast where we have guests talk about how they have gone from trauma to triumph, from adversity to adventure. Just amazing humans coming on and talking about real life and how we get through tough things. So, with that, I wanted to say a huge thank you all the way to Thailand right now to you, Jeremy, for being the guest on episode 94. I'm so grateful.
I'm happy to be here. Yeah, happy to chat
Yeah.
with you about the trauma to triumph that I went through, and because I know it's something that affects a lot of people, affects a lot of guys and women as well. It's
Yeah.
something that we can talk about, but yeah, it's a very important issue to talk about today.
Yeah. Well, and I'm so glad that we scheduled it today because today is the last day of Mental Health Awareness Month. But June, if I remember correctly, is Men's Mental Health Awareness Month. So we're like last day of Mental Health Awareness Month. And then when this will go live this Friday, this will be Men's Mental Health Awareness Month, right? And you know all about men's mental health. You're a man, you've got an amazing experience with life, and we're going to get all into that. But I wanted to just kind of brag about you a little bit and just like introduce you, and read about you in front of you. And then we'll just start talking if that's cool with you.
Sounds great.
Okay.
I'll
So
try
I'm
not to
looking.
blush.
I know. Try not to. Try not to. Okay. So if you guys look in the show notes, you can see this link. We're going to put all the info here. Unhookedacademy.com. Jeremy, you are a former Buddhist monk, which so much to ask you about that. Executive coach, meditation teacher, and you help high achieving men break free from compulsive habits and live with integrity, clarity, and purpose. That's really cool that you're devoting your life to helping people. How did this all come to be? And tell us a little bit about your story and we'll go from there.
Yeah. That last part, the living with integrity and purpose, that's really what it's all about, is living a more fulfilling life. And my own story was I had a great life. I had a life that looked incredible from the outside. I was very successful. I had a lot of accomplishments, but I wasn't fulfilled on the inside. I wasn't living a life of integrity. I had no purpose. I felt empty. And it's something I notice in a lot of guys today who are high achieving professionals. They have it all on the outside. They get a lot
Yeah.
of accolades, but they might feel empty. They don't really have
Mm.
a moral compass. They don't feel like they're living a life of integrity. And it's a very painful and lonely place to be, where you feel isolated and alone. And so that's a lot of the work I do today. To give a little context and backstory,
Yeah.
my background is really in the sciences. I was studying genetics and genomics. Ended up working on a PhD at Duke University for genetics. And so I was on this track of external success and external validation, but living, this empty life, and had a lot of secrets, porn addiction being one of them, but addiction in general, addicted
Yeah.
to junk food, to partying, to addicted to validation, wanting people to validate me and say
Yep.
nice things about me. And it all culminated in this moment of realizing that I couldn't keep living that way, that I was living further and further from a life of real happiness,
Hmm.
feeling really fulfilled and content inside. And I can talk a little bit about what the turning point was for me, but to make a long story short,
Yeah.
I had just this moment where I realized I had to change something about how I was living. And that got me interested in some of these deeper
Yeah.
questions about fulfillment.
I love that you have that science background and thank you for your vulnerability. I know it's what you do in your coaching life and you're obviously in touch with your emotions and you've done inner work as like a former Buddhist monk and all that. But I am always amazed when someone just sits down with me. We just met, we were connected through emails and like, somebody else through just like booking this, but I appreciate when people just sit down and they're like, "Hi, here I am. This is my story," because I think a lot of people listening, whether you're male or female, you either are somebody who feels that way or has felt that way, or maybe you're married to somebody who feels that way, or maybe you're wondering if the man in your life is doing okay and you're wondering, is he feeling fulfilled, but you don't know? And so the fact that you're just coming out and saying, "Yeah, I had everything on paper and I wasn't fulfilled." That that's somebody on the other end I know is going, "Yeah, okay. I'm not it's not taboo to talk about. It's okay to say that."
Mhm.
Right?
Yeah,
So I just wanna
yeah.
thank you for that.
Yeah, and I have to admit, I wish I could say that this was a real act of courage and vulnerability for me to open up about this, but, it's so funny 'cause it when I first started talking about my history with porn addiction, it was the most terrifying thing that I had ever done. I mean, it was the
Yeah,
biggest, darkest secret in my closet, and I was terrified to even admit that I even watched porn, let alone
yeah,
struggled with an addictive relationship with it. And so back then, it was very courageous and vulnerable, and these days, it's something that I feel very comfortable talking about, in part because I know I'm not alone. I know this is something that impacts so many people, men and women, and I
mhm,
know there's nothing to be ashamed of.
yeah,
But I just wanna normalize, for the people out there listening that in the beginning, sharing about these topics is incredibly uncomfortable and can be terrifying for those people out there who are still struggling with it. And so, if you're able to talk about it, it's a huge step forward and it gets easier. The more you open up about it and the more you talk about it in safe
sure,
spaces and with people you feel comfortable with, it gets easier and easier to open up and you let go of the shame of a lot of these
yes,
things, whether it's porn and sex addiction or whether it's just the fact that you feel empty and unfulfilled despite living, a
yeah,
quote unquote great life. That can also be a source of shame that people don't know how to talk about.
yes, both the it's around pornography and that's taboo, and then also the guilt of, "I'm paying my bills, I'm healthy, why can't I just get my shit together?" Right?
Yeah,
Like, "What's
yeah.
wrong with me?" I like the realness of it because the shame is and when people are like when I actually started looking into shame, and tell me if you agree, shame is like that fear of disconnection, right? Or being rejected from your so you gotta hide whatever that is, right?
Mhm,
But then the way to beat the shame is vulnerability, right?
mhm.
Vulnerability, like, shame it doesn't really it can't survive if you're being vulnerable, right? The shame, necessarily. What do
Yeah.
you think? Yeah.
Yeah, so, the shame, I would just add a little bit to your definition. It's not
Yeah.
just the fear of being judged or outcast, but it's also the core belief that there's something wrong with me. I think that's
Ah,
an important component of the shame is I'm broken in some way, and if people knew the truth, then I would be cast out or then I would be judged. But
oh,
there's this core belief of I am broken, I am unworthy, I am unlovable, I'm flawed in some way. And
sure.
that's where the shame comes from, and it leads to that deep fear of I'm gonna if people knew the truth about me.
Ah,
And this is how it relates to, well, the secret to overcoming it is just be vulnerable. The
yeah.
problem is that is what most people fear is if people knew the truth about me, then I would be cast out. So vulnerability, while it is one of the doorways to getting out of it, it's also the thing that people are afraid if I am
Oh,
vulnerable, then I'll be cast out, so I have to hide it. I have to pretend to be perfect. So it's both
yes.
the secret to freedom, and it's also the cage that imprisons us.
To be real, if they knew that I'm having trouble with this pornography addiction, they're not gonna wanna be around me because 'cause I'm, like, deviant, I can't control this, I'm weak, I'm right, right. When in reality, it might not even be about the sex, it's the lack of fulfillment. That might be how you're dealing with it, but there's something in the root of, like, the dope I mean, there's so many things, I don't even know where to begin with you. You got the neuroscience angle, you've got you've understood it, you've been through it, and then you've got the science background, so I'm like, where do we even begin here? This
Yeah, there's
is
too many
no,
topics,
I'm like,
and they're all
where did
they're
we
all fun topics to explore.
I know. Well, I guess
Yeah,
let me ask you this. How did you know at what point were you like, this my habit of watching pornography is becoming something that I might need to look at, and it's becoming like
yeah.
a source of adversity for me, maybe? Do you
Yeah, that's a
remember?
great place to start because
Yeah.
it will give the listeners a lot of people who are listening to this, there's a few camps. One will be people who know they have a problem with porn and they know how it's impacting their life. And there
Yeah.
will also be people who, there's a good chunk of people who, say, I watch porn. I know something's a little bit off about it, but I don't, is it really a problem? And how is this impacting my life? And so I think understanding what are the
Yeah.
real consequences and what are the real ramifications of watching porn are important, in part because porn is different from a lot of other addictions where
Mm,
a lot of the real consequences and ramifications are not things that are immediately obvious. And they're things that are accumulate over years. They accumulate over a lifetime. They build up slowly and almost imperceptibly. But if
mm,
it's something that you're engaging with on a daily basis or even on a semi daily basis, it starts to influence and change who you are in really profound ways that are hard to see unless you can take a real step back and look at what it's doing to your life. And a lot of times it's just hard to make the connection because people
sure.
will say, I didn't even realize that the trouble I was having, with intimacy with my partner had to do with the porn I was watching. I didn't realize that my lack of focus and my inability to stay concentrated on my work was because of the way I was screwing with my dopamine network through porn. So there's so many subtle ways that it impacts our life.
Mhm.
So to give you a little glimpse into what my life was like in the
Yeah.
moment that I realized it, I started watching porn when I was quite young. It didn't start with porn. For me, it
Sure.
started with things like the lingerie catalogs that would come in the mail, the
Yep.
Victoria's Secret
Yes.
catalog, the J.C. Penney catalog. This is actually, it's funny because a lot of guys, when I say this, they're like, yeah, me too. The Macy's catalog, the underwear section
You remember
was
from your
my,
childhood just kinda seeing that
exactly.
stuff, and you're like, "Oh."
Yeah. Well, but that's exactly it. You see this stuff and it's just, wow, when I look at these pictures, my
Yep.
body feels good. Like something inside me likes the way I feel when I see these pictures. And
Sure.
it's very innocent. It's very, there's,
Yeah.
it's kind of this innate curiosity around sexuality and attraction. And there's nothing
Sure.
wrong with that. And so it starts from that place, but you start to learn from a very young age when I look at this kind of material, these kind of images, I can make myself feel better. And if I combine that with touching myself, wow, I can really make myself feel better. And so it becomes a very easy source of self regulating.
Ah,
Of if you're in emotional distress or emotional discomfort from loneliness, isolation, boredom, anxiety, fear, it becomes a really easy way when you're in your room to
sure.
self regulate. The problem is it can grow over time and it can escalate, particularly when you get access to the internet. So for me, it started with things like the lingerie catalogs. It started
Sure.
with even comic books, the
Mm.
certain kind of comic book characters that were scantily
Yes,
clad. Like,
yes. Wonder Woman
but
was not yeah, she was
yeah,
that
exactly. You would see, and wow, what an attractive person. And it grew over time. We got internet, got dial up internet. You could start to download individual photos and individual videos.
yep.
But it escalated, especially at the point when high speed internet came and you started to get these tube sites where you
Mm,
could have an infinite variety, an infinite amount of porn for free immediately.
mhm.
And that, puts the addiction on steroids. And so I got to the point where when I was in college, I went to school at University of California at Davis,
Okay.
and I got to the point where I was watching porn every night. Maybe an hour, sometimes it would be
Yeah,
2 hours.
yeah.
It was my routine. I would go into my bedroom, lock the door, and log on to the porn sites.
Yep.
And it kept growing again to the point I was maybe a senior in college at this time, or I think I had just graduated and I was still staying around my university doing research in a lab.
Uh-huh.
And I remember there was one moment that really shook things for me. It was the moment where I noticed, hey, this is really a problem. And I remember just walking down the street. This was Davis, California.
Yep.
My life was
Yeah,
incredible at the time. The skies were blue. I was a
everything.
stellar rock star student.
Yeah.
I was captain of a sports team. I had a lot of friends. I had lovers. I was romantically engaged. So life was really
Yeah.
good.
Uh-huh.
And I remember walking down the street and seeing these two college girls walking in front of me. And I remember being so consumed with lust and craving to stare at their bodies and objectify them. And I remember in that moment, it felt like this big black hole was opening up inside of me, just this emptiness inside of me that was just screaming at me and saying, you need to get that. You need to talk to them. You need to sleep with them and have sex. And you need that. And it was this feeling of just emptiness that said, unless you have that, you won't be happy. And it was in that moment, so many kind of deep, important insights occurred to me. One was that that state of lust and craving was a state of suffering,
Mm.
that I could have everything going well in my life, which I did.
Sure.
And if I
Yeah.
kept focusing on what I didn't have, I would never be happy because it didn't
Mhm.
matter how much I achieved or accomplished. If I kept looking at what I didn't have, then I would always be living in this state of lack or of suffering. The other thing I realized, and this was really important, is that if I kept going down this path, if I kept living life the way I was living, I saw where that was leading me. I saw my future, and I envisioned myself as this 65-year-old man being a creep, hitting on girls at college bars. Like I saw the fact that I was going that direction because I would, you know, my trajectory is I would be interested in someone, I would sleep with
Uh-huh.
them, and then I would get bored after a few days and, okay, I need something new. Because that's what
Mhm.
porn does to us. It gets us addicted to novelty,
Yep.
thinking, oh, that video I just watched, that's old news. I need something new to excite me. And so I saw where that was leading, and I realized that if I didn't make a change, I was headed in a really dark direction.
Mm.
And so that sent me on a little bit of an existential crisis.
I'm
It
sure.
made me realize that I need to change something fundamental about how I'm living. And it was a bit of a dark, I really had kind of a dark period where I
Yeah.
felt, it doesn't matter what I accomplish, I'll never be happy. And
Mm.
that sent me, fortunately, because I was a little bit of a geek and a nerd and liked to read books,
Yep.
it sent me to the bookstore and I started looking at books on what happiness really is. What is happiness? Is it even possible? And I
Mhm.
started to realize that people were actually studying these things. And there was the
Mhm.
field of positive psychology.
Love it.
People actually studied what leads to human flourishing and happiness. And through that exploration, I ended up finding a book on Buddhist meditation called Happiness by Mathieu Ricard.
Okay.
And that book fundamentally changed my life. I mean, it totally changed my perspective on what
Mm.
happiness really means. And I had been living under this impression that happiness was just about having as much pleasure and feeling good as I can. Just more sense pleasure, more validation, more sex, more money, more food. But what real happiness was, I started to realize is things like connection,
Yep.
being of service, living with integrity, all these things that actually lead to happiness, gratitude,
Yeah.
that have nothing to do with just having more pleasure. So that was the big kind of turning point in my life where I started to realize, oh, porn is impacting my life in really harmful ways. I'm addicted to it. It's causing, impacts on my relationships, my sense of self-worth. I mean, we didn't even talk about all the
Yeah.
ways that porn impacts you, but I'll pause there because, I'm sure you have
No. Oh
some
my
questions or
gosh.
thoughts.
I think there's so much goodness in what you said because it's like if you're listening and you do struggle with porn, you're probably nodding your head going, "Wow, okay." And then maybe you don't struggle with it, but you're sort of you can identify with that feeling of emptiness or like,
Mhm,
"Why don't I feel like this is enough?" Or, "Why do I need that person to say this for me to feel like, whatever that is, that it's that bottomless pit of pleasure seeking, like you were saying.
mhm,
And what I find really fascinating is that, and not even looking at porn from like a judgmental viewpoint, but just stepping back and saying, okay, if you watch it daily, are you aware of what is actually being happening in your brain? Like, and I'm saying this with zero judgment. And then
mhm.
I don't think everybody is aware. Does
Yeah.
everyone who watches porn daily, they're probably like, well, that's just like my thing. And like, that's like a separate component.
Harmless entertainment. Yeah.
It's just like Netflix and chill, but, like, I'm doing
Yeah.
my thing, but
So
can you
actually, this is one thing that is really important is like one of the things that was really important about what I was learning about at that time was the importance of neuroplasticity. And so in that book on when I started learning about positive psychology and I started learning about neuroplasticity, and I read this book on Buddhism, and it also kind of reinforced the
Yeah.
understanding of neuroplasticity. What that means, we now have the understanding that our brain is constantly changing and rewiring throughout our
Mhm.
life. And
Mhm.
importantly, that what we do with our brain, what we do with our thoughts and our attention actually strengthens those neural pathways. So there's this phrase that I love. It's neurons that fire together, wire together. What it
Yes.
means is the more you use a certain neural pathway, the stronger those connections become and the more likely it is to fire in the future. So the
Mm.
more you use neural pathways of judgment or anger, the more you fire up these neural pathways of being angry, the more hardwired those neural pathways become. Now, when you look at that through the lens of looking at pornography, what happens is the more often you light up these neural pathways of craving, of wanting something you don't have,
Oh.
you are strengthening those neural pathways, which means that they are going to become stronger over time. The neural pathways for craving, for lusting, for being dissatisfied with what you have
Yeah.
and thinking you need something more become stronger. And so that's one of the key insights that helps people realize this is not just harmless behavior. You're actually influencing the default functioning of your brain to the point where you are becoming just a slave to lust. And that's what I
Mm.
noticed is that I had hardwired that lust so deeply in my brain that it was out of control. I would go to a cafe to study, to read a book,
Mhm.
and when an attractive person walked by, my mind just got hijacked. It was like lust, 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 and I couldn't control
Yeah.
it because those pathways in the brain were so strong. And so that's one of the really important parts for people to understand is that the more you engage with those things, it strengthens those behaviors. And
Yeah.
when you couple that with realizing that craving, lusting is a state of suffering, it's a state where you're looking at what you don't have rather than being content or appreciating what you do have. It is a direct relationship between, the more you engage those neural pathways and the more dissatisfaction you feel in your life.
It's so interesting to look at it that way, because it's looking at it from a just actually from the brain and then from the philosophical standpoint, you're always sort of removed, right? Like, if you're watching that, you're like, "I'm not that, but that's what I want, and that's what." But it your brain is just getting set up for always sort of being separated, but then dopamine and then back, and then dopamine and then back.
Mhm.
It's the way you
You're just
say.
a passenger on the roller coaster rather than, yeah. You just, oh, okay. But you don't realize what it actually is, which is you're
Yeah.
engaging in artificial dissatisfaction. I mean, and
Yeah.
there's a Buddhist analogy, there's a Buddhist story that was really impactful for me. And are you familiar with the realm of hungry ghosts? Have you heard that term before?
I have not. The
Okay. So
the realm
it's a
of hungry
phenomenal
ghosts.
story, kind of
Okay.
metaphor. So it comes
Yeah.
from the Buddhist tradition, which for the listeners out there, my background, I'm an atheist, but I'm also a
Okay.
Buddhist because Buddhism, for the most part, it's not really a religion. It's a philosophy of the mind. It's a
Sure.
philosophy of how to live in a good way and, look at what leads to happiness and what leads to suffering. There are parts of the world where Buddhism is more like a religion, but
Sure.
particularly in the West and the origins of Buddhism was really just understand your mind and understand what leads to a good life.
Right. Okay.
So, in Buddhist philosophy, Buddhist cosmology, there were these kind of different realms of existence. And we know now that they're not real places, they're not real realms, they're more manifestations of the mind. So, just kind of
Okay.
keep that in mind. So, one realm is, for example, like the heavenly realm, where everything is just pleasant all the time. It's the realm of the gods, and it's just full of
It's
pleasure and songs and food and all this
yes.
pleasant stuff. There's also the hell realm, where everything is unpleasant and painful, and it's just torture and fire
Yep.
and brimstone, the hell realm.
Yep.
There's the animal realm, which is just kind of animalistic primal urges and things like that.
Yep. Yep.
There's the human realm, which we live in, which is kind of a mix of a lot of these things.
Everything.
Yeah. And then there's this one really interesting realm called the realm of hungry ghosts. And it's this realm filled with these creatures, these ghost like creatures that have these massive stomachs, these huge bellies and huge stomachs, but they have tiny needle like throats and pinhole mouths. So they have these tiny throats and tiny mouths. They can never eat fast enough to satiate their massive hunger. So they live this existence of being incredibly hungry all the time, and they can never eat enough to satisfy their hunger. And so their whole life is just filled with insatiable hunger that never gets satisfied. And that is what it feels like to be an addict. It's like it's this insatiable, I need more. Nothing is ever good enough. And you can see that it's
Yeah.
not just porn, it's no amount of money is ever enough. No amount of validation is ever enough. Like you're never enough. You always want more. And
Mm.
that's what it feels like to be an addict.
Gosh, that is a very as you were describing that, it's very powerful. Because when you think about that, like you said, you can apply it to anything. It's that never enoughness. You
Hmm.
can't consume fast enough to get that.
It's
Wow.
insatiable.
Wow.
You can throw as much porn on your mind as you want, and you still feel
There's
dissatisfied because you're not actually filling your cup. And here's the beautiful thing about it is that there's a solution to this, which is actually to focus on what actually satisfies the soul. What satisfies the heart. And this is where kind of the Buddhist philosophy comes in. It's
yeah.
okay, what leads to genuine flourishing and happiness? And again, it's things like contentment, gratitude, compassion, loving kindness, like these things that
Yes.
actually make us feel full and fulfilled and happy and joyful. It's like there are things you can do to
Mhm.
actually lead a happy life. And the cool part, through neuroplasticity, you can cultivate the mental qualities that lead to happiness. So gratitude, in the same way that lust is a neural pathway
Yeah.
that you can cultivate through your actions, gratitude and contentment and appreciation are mental qualities that you can strengthen through training. And
Yes.
that's what meditation is. It's simply the act of training your brain in
Yep.
qualities that lead to greater happiness.
Bingo. Well, and I'm glad you said that because if people are like, "Oh man, I'm in this addiction and like that the pathways are set, like I'm oh no, like I've
Hmm,
been literally going down the wrong path and I've set the wrong pathways and they're probably shame spiraling going, I'm an asshole and I'm this." The good news is like your brain's like, "We can change. Just tell me what you want to change into," right? Like
exactly.
it's malleable.
It's not a death sentence. It's not who you are. And this is, we don't need to kind of get into the intricacies of the recovery world and like
Sure.
12 step or non 12 step, but it's one of the things that I, really firmly believe in. It's like you are not an addict with a capital A. Like it is not who you are. Like you might have an
Oh,
addictive relationship with something. It might be a temporary, kind of, oh yeah, like you used that as a coping mechanism. It was a
sure.
learned coping mechanism, but you can
Right.
change and you can transform and you are more powerful than that substance and your brain can rewire itself and
Mm.
learn different ways of being in the world.
It immediately when you said that, it reminded me of one of my guests on a previous episode, Steve Goodman. He has a men's mental health podcast called Forged in Silence. And then he has a no alcohol needed podcast, and his addiction was alcohol. And he said he got to the point where he's like, I'm not just coaching people on how to resist it, and like you've said in previous episodes, how to white knuckle and, like, be like, 30 days without porn, alright, 60 days, 90
Yeah.
days, which is great, by the way, but he's like, I don't he genuinely said, he's like, "I don't crave alcohol. It's not what I do anymore. It's not
Mhm.
I know how that story ends." And he's like, he never would have thought there would be a day where he wouldn't have to white knuckle it.
Yeah,
You
and
know what I
that's what
mean?
real freedom is and that's why I call my podcast Unhooked. It's like learning
Yes.
how to get unhooked and have real inner freedom from addiction. And it's not even about any particular substance or behavior. It's the
No.
inner freedom from, freedom from running away from pain and not
Mm.
needing to chase after pleasure. It's like when you change your relationship to pain and pleasure, that's when everything changes.
Oh, that was a moment. I just, like, jaw dropped. I was like, "Okay." So it's not it's whatever your addiction might be, whether it I mean, it could be exercise, it could be junk food, pornography, anger, victimhood, like, pick your addiction, right?
Mhm.
Correct me if I'm wrong, instead of facing that emotion you're feeling when the urge comes up, you then go to whatever it is, overworking, yelling, shutting down. You're like, "Nope, this is what I use to do that instead of feeling that."
Yeah. Yeah, it's very simple. It's like this is the human condition. In some ways, we're
Yeah.
all on the addiction spectrum is
Yeah.
we don't like to feel unpleasant emotions, and we want to feel pleasant emotions all the time.
Yes.
And
Yes.
that is what kind of the addictive nature of the mind is an unpleasant emotion comes up and we want to run away from it. We want to escape it.
Nope, you froze.
And that's how addiction shows up.
Still recording, but you froze. Let's see. Can you hear me?
Yes, it looks like my connection just,
Okay.
let's see. Let me try to get back
Oh,
on my hotspot.
still there. I'm gonna stay here, and then you can join in again. Oh, there he is. Your thoughts. You're like, "That am not my thoughts."
Yeah. Anyways, yeah, for some reason,
Yeah,
my hotspot dropped, but now it's back on, so
all good. So,
hopefully
yeah,
all
I think
good for now. Yeah.
I think you were saying something about
But
where
we were
were
talking
we?
about pleasure and
Somewhere
pain and just kinda this fundamental, like, okay, I think I don't know the when it cut off, but, like, the human condition. So maybe I'll just start there.
Yes, the human condition.
Yeah. Yeah, so the human condition really is this kind of fundamental running away from unpleasant experiences and running towards pleasant experiences. And it happens on a very subconscious level. We're barely even aware that this is this is our makeup on a almost a physiological evolutionary mechanism is to run
Mm,
towards things that feel good and to run away from things that feel bad, and it's protected us. The problem is it
sure.
can get on overdrive and to the point where any hint of unpleasantness we don't want to be with, and we now have access to so much artificial stimulation for pleasure that it's easy to get lost in that trap of wanting every moment of our waking lives to be filled with pleasure and to not experience even the tiniest bit of unpleasantness. And this includes things that are natural emotions like grief or sadness or loneliness or fear or anxiety. We don't like to feel those. And so when those arise, we say, I need to do something about this. And we search for a coping mechanism. Porn, junk food, those are the obvious ones. But like you said, it can be anything. It can be, you know, career success or validation or people giving us likes on our Instagram posts,
Oh, yeah,
anything that makes us
totally.
feel good, we search for that as a way to suppress the unpleasantness. And so when you change your relationship to that and you say, oh, this is an unpleasant emotion. I don't need to run away from this. I can just be with this. That changes everything because you no longer need to run away. You have freedom from this incessant trap of needing to kind of arrange the conditions in your life so it's just pleasant all the time, which is
That is
impossible.
so well said. That was really the way I mean, I just feel like every person can relate to what you just said because our culture is engineered that way now where it's like pick your stimuli. What do you want? What do you want to avoid today? Right? It's like kind of crazy when you think about it. And I'm
Hmm.
looking at my own behaviors and going, "Oh yeah, that's you do that, you do that, or you do that." Like we all like none of this is coming from judgment. It's just amazing to me how we do. We avoid pain. And I sometimes
Hmm.
too, like, you avoid the hard conversations because it's not
Hmm.
fun. So I don't want to do that. So let's just not. And let's have
Hmm.
resentment instead because that's easier, right? But then you're going to go to something, whether it's pornography, you're going to go to something to
Self-regulate,
not
self-medicate. Yeah.
self-regulate. You
To
know what I
numb
thought was
out,
interesting?
to escape. Yeah.
Yeah. What I thought was interesting in one of your past episodes, you mentioned reasons to cut, you had some reasons of maybe considering the idea of quitting porn
Yeah.
addiction, quitting pornography again. And I love how you talk about it from a very non-judgmental lens. You're almost saying, hey, take a look at yourself, how you're feeling, and then ask yourself these questions like, can I sustain this? Where is this going? It's less
Hmm.
about shame and judgment, but more about look at the data, right? One
Yeah.
thing you said, a study found that when someone's watching pornography, I did not know this, that the parts of their brain that light up are related to object identification versus
Yeah.
I was like, "What?" Like that is all like I'll let you explain it, but
Yeah.
I that blew my mind actually.
Yeah. It blew my mind as well, and for full transparency,
Yeah.
I remember when I heard that, about that
Yeah.
study, and I heard about it years ago, and I've had trouble actually finding
Okay.
what study that was from, and so,
Sure. It's out
here's
there.
the thing, it might be a bogus study, but what's interesting is, like, my own internal experience of how I engage with porn and a lot of the guys I talk to, it kind of verifies this, and so whether or not the study exists somewhere. I can't actually find it anymore. I wish I could. But the study essentially it showed that, there are different regions of our brain that are
Yep.
activated under different scenarios. And so when you're talking to somebody, certain regions are lighting up, some of the mirror neurons where you're engaged with kind of
Yes.
understanding the emotions of the person you're talking to. You know that you're talking to a person. So there's certain regions that light up when you're talking to a person.
Yes.
There are other regions that light up when you're interacting with objects. When you pick up, a stapler, when you grab a hammer, when you look at a
Yep.
table, kind of there are certain regions that are associated with looking more at objects rather than looking at people. And what they found is that when people are watching porn, the brain regions that are lighting up are not the regions that are associated with looking at people and understanding emotions. It's the regions of the brain that are associated with looking at objects. And that, that's my experience of when I look at porn, I'm not thinking, "Oh, this is a person and what are they feeling?" I'm just looking at it as an object I want to acquire, as this is
Mhm.
an object that will make me feel good.
Mhm.
And we become
Mhm.
totally dissociated from kind of the human component. This is why I can totally screw with intimacy is I mean, we didn't even talk about all the ways that porn can really impact intimacy and sex and relationships, but you become accustomed and conditioned to relating to sexuality as something that you engage with on a screen. There's no human to human connection. You're not taking into account, does this person like this? Do they not? There's no risk really. It's just, I get what I
Man,
want immediately. I can have whatever I want when I want it, and I don't have to be vulnerable. I don't have to communicate and have a back and forth. Is this okay? Is this not okay? We just
sure.
learn that we get what we want when we want it immediately, and it's a highly intense spike of stimulation. The analogy I like to give to the guys I work with, it's like in the same way that, Doritos potato chips,
Mhm.
and they have these like just wild flavors, Cool Ranch,
Yes.
nacho cheese. Imagine if not just you have like a Doritos potato chip, that kind of stimulation, but imagine that every chip you pull out was a new flavor and you had no idea what to expect. And it was this highly stimulating, very intense. And now add on top of that, imagine that every potato chip has a $1 billion algorithm inside of it that figures out your personal preferences and what's going to give you the highest dopamine hit on every bite. That's what it's like when you're engaged with porn and social media is there's a $1 billion algorithm that's figuring out how to hijack your dopamine system, how to hijack your brain as effectively as it can in order to keep you hooked. Like it's not just a kind of innocent substance that's just floating out there in the world. There's a $1 billion industry behind this trying to get you hooked. A lot of people don't know the porn industry is bigger than all of the major sports leagues in the US combined. So the NBA, the NFL, the MLB, every sports league combined, the porn industry is a bigger industry than all of that. And people don't realize it. They just think, "Oh,
No.
it's porn. It's just innocent, harmless entertainment." But it's not. They're learning how to hijack your brain because it rewards them financially.
I'm glad you mentioned that because right before I just looked, I was curious what, the porn industry. This is what I have. Global adult entertainment industry, 60 to 100 billion annually. Online, 15 to 20 billion annually. OnlyFans creator spending 7.2 billion annually. Woo! Mobile devices account for the majority of adult content traffic, so accessible billions. They got all the they got all the data and then use AI. Okay, what can we do now? Let's take it up another level. All right, we know this guy or girl, I'm sure there's women who have addictions too. She likes this, she logs on this time, make sure we serve up this, right? I mean,
Mhm.
it's almost if you're out there struggling, it's partly not your fault. Like, it's like
Yeah.
you're
Well,
also
and
being
to normalize exactly. And this is one of the things is so important is I work with a lot of guys and a lot of the guys I work with have gone through all kinds of decades of recovery from alcohol, from substance abuse. And every single one that I've worked with has told me that porn is a much harder thing to break free from than alcohol, substances, because of how pervasive it is, how accessible it is, how affordable it is. It's the analogy I like to give is imagine you're a recovering cocaine addict and you have to carry cocaine with you in your pocket wherever you go.
oh, wow.
That's what it's like.
That's
I
a
mean, everyone walks around with their phone in their pocket and you can get it for free instantly. That's what it's like. I mean, it's everywhere.
mhm. That's a brilliant way of thinking about it because that literally is what it's like. And then what you said before is, like, the negative effects aren't immediately noticeable. I have not thought about it that way either. Like, it's accessible anytime, any moment, whatever you want, whenever you want, and if you're struggling with that, that's very difficult to overcome. Like you were saying, it's addiction at its source is probably similar, but the accessibility of this addiction
Yeah.
is wild. And then to me, I like how you said the negative effects of porn aren't immediately evident because if you do cocaine or you're wasted, that's going to be noticeable within a couple hours or whatever, how long that takes. You, it with pornography, it's just you're good. You can go to
Right.
work, you can do this, you're fine, right? The house is clean, blah, blah, blah. But what you don't see is, like, if you were looking at your brain, you don't see the
Yeah.
highways being built.
Exactly, exactly. You don't see the highways being built until, they're the biggest highways on the land and they're all leading to Las Vegas casinos, and the problem is it
Yeah.
really is so imperceptible the way that it impacts expectations of it. I mean, we didn't talk about this, but one of the
Yeah.
things I realized, one of the reasons I realized I had to quit porn was realizing how porn was giving me incredibly unrealistic expectations of what my partner's bodies were supposed to look like.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
had these expectations that everyone, was supposed to look like these 20-year-old porn stars that I was watching. and that's what normal was. That's what I should expect.
Yeah,
And that what they were doing in the porn scenes was what, I should be expecting in with my relationships and my partners.
sure.
And so it just totally skews on a subconscious level what you expect out of intimacy. It completely messes with you on a subconscious level. And again, a lot of people just aren't aware of how it's impacting them, in part because they've been living most of their life engaged in it. There's this famous
Yeah.
saying of, you ask a fish, how's the water? And he says, what water? Because his whole life he's been swimming in it. And he doesn't know what it's like, doesn't even know that it's a thing. So most guys aren't even aware, like, hey, how is the quality of your life and your relationships without porn? And he's like, what do you mean without porn? Most guys don't know what their life is like without the impact of that substance on their life.
Mm. Another amazing analogy. I've never heard it. I've never thought about it that way. Yeah, if that's all you know, then you just sort of know this superficial form of stimulation. And again, I'm saying that without judgment. I'm saying
Hmm.
that's where you're getting that stimulation. You don't even know that that's yeah, you don't even know what you don't know if you've been immersed in
Hmm.
it forever. And
Yeah.
again, I say that like it's almost like it's everywhere. So even if young boys or younger girls have started watching it at a younger age, you kind of go, "Well, yeah, I mean, it's everywhere." Like, how are they
Yeah.
not I mean, you're saying, yeah, like, at a young age, it impacts you and it's not the greatest idea, but then again, you're like, it's I'm sure try being 12 or 13 and, like, it's almost
Well,
like
even worse than that, imagine because even kids as young as like 8 or 9 have cell phones now and accessing it. Imagine if you grew up from the age of 8 years old having access to what kids are seeing on Pornhub and they're watching that. I mean, imagine a kid watching what he's seeing on Pornhub every night for the next 10 years before he has an interaction with another female. And then when they do have sex, he's like, "Oh, okay, so you should be into spanking, you should be into choking, you should be into anal, you should like it all the time, you should be ready whenever I'm ready. You should never say no because that never happens in porn. You should never not be ready." All these expectations that not only young boys are getting, young girls are getting the expectation that they should be into this and they're not allowed to
yeah,
say no because you never
yep.
see a girl saying no in a porn video because then it wouldn't be porn. And so all kinds of ways that it's screwing with, you know, especially for young people who are getting this at an early age.
Yeah, I it's
And
just,
one thing
actually
I
one oh, go ahead. Mhm.
yeah, just I wanna go back to one thing we were talking
Yeah,
earlier about why it's so hard to break free from, the accessibility, the affordability, the
yeah.
anonymity. These are known as the 3 A's of porn addiction. And
Uh,
there's another thing that makes porn so hard to break free from, and that is the component of shame. This is something that is so it's for whatever reason, it is more taboo to talk about. It's more sensitive.
yep.
It's more shameful, and there are fewer places for guys to get support. There's support groups for alcohol. There's support groups for substance abuse. It is very hard for guys to feel safe enough to open up about porn and just let alone to know that it's normal to talk about or normal to struggle with. And so that's another reason why it's really hard is that sense of, oh, well, yeah, I can talk about alcohol recovery, but talking about how I have a unhealthy relationship with porn, I don't feel comfortable talking about that. And so it's just another reason why it's a really hard thing to break free from is the level of shame and the lack of support.
It makes it one of the probably most difficult addictions, I'm sure, because you've got that body, neurological, physiological, then you've got the social, emotional being like, I must not let anyone know that I'm secretly trying to recover from this. Well, and
Yeah.
that's why I'm so happy to have you on the show because on my show, we haven't talked about this yet. You know? And pornography addiction. Like, it's something that I want to talk about the things that people are afraid to talk about because that's the adversity. That's where the real adversity is when you can't talk about it. Like, you can
Yeah.
talk about, I'm trying to fight cancer. I'm, having anxiety issues. I'm, struggling with perimenopause and menopause and my hormone. I'm struggling with unemployment. But the minute you talk about you hear that pornography, porn, you're like, "Oh, that's, like, extra." But yet, everybody I'm sure, I don't wanna say everybody, but most human beings can relate to sexuality. So,
Mhm.
like, people probably it needs to be talked about, is what I'm saying,
Wait,
and that's
yeah, it's one of the things that it's so almost mind-boggling about this is how it is both simultaneously incredibly normalized, where everybody kind of knows porn is a thing and knows that most people watch it and just say, "Oh, it's just porn, it's normal." And at the same time,
yeah.
it's totally not normalized in the sense that it's totally taboo to talk about and we just don't
Yes.
discuss it and we just pretend it doesn't exist in some ways. And so it's both
Yeah,
hyper normalized and hyper shamed and taboo, which is kind of this perfect recipe for disaster where you don't get to talk about the ramifications. You don't get to talk about how it can impact people because it's taboo. And, oh, we don't talk about that at the dinner table. Or you can only joke about it, but you can't actually have a real conversation about it.
right.
So it's a weird place in society where it's normalized, but
Yeah.
also not normalized.
That's a great point where it's like, here it is, everything in your face, and it's in the culture and everything, but just enjoy it, but don't talk about it.
Yeah, yeah,
And if you're having a problem with it, like, too bad, it's weird, but if you're having a problem with alcohol or anything else, we can totally talk about that.
yeah.
Like, no wonder people, right? So,
No wonder people
let's
struggle with
get
it.
I know.
And on
Well,
one
let
more
me
thing, just on that,
yeah,
another reason why it's so hard is that sexuality is a beautiful, healthy component of what it means to be a human. And so,
right.
for some things like alcohol or substances, you can just say, I'm just going to cut that off completely. I don't want to engage with it. But with sexuality, it's like, no, but actually, I want to have a healthy sexuality. I want to embrace healthy sexuality. I want to have a
Right.
vibrant, enjoyable sex life with my partner. So it's also something that we can't just cut it off completely. We have to say, okay, how do I have a healthy relationship with sexuality and not shame myself for my desires, but also at the same time realize that there are limits and boundaries and certain things that are skillful to kind of say no to.
Yes. Yes, that's a great point. Well, and that brings me to I'm so glad that what your life's work is like being that lighthouse, right? For people who are like, I can't who are maybe starting to notice that like this is dulling my senses. They're starting to or maybe just something's going off in their head right now where they're like, maybe I'm doing this too much. Your whole career and life and purpose, I mean, your whole program with Unhooked Academy, right, is to help people, not shame them, not judge them, but help
Mhm.
them reclaim control of their life, right? And then like find out maybe what it means to have a healthy relationship with sexuality.
Yeah, yeah, and not just sexuality, but integrity in general. I mean, it goes the work I do with guys goes way beyond porn. For most guys, porn
Ah.
is the doorway into the program, and they say, "Oh, okay, I have to address this. I need some support with this." But once they get in, they realize, "Oh, we're not just talking about porn. We're talking about, honesty with my partners, living with integrity, having some kind of moral or ethical foundation for my life, some values that I live by, learning about healthy habits, sleep and exercise, and doing things that support my life and doing less of the things that bring my life down into the mud."
Mm. Beautiful. It's almost like, yeah, the addiction or whatever you're struggling with is just the beginning of so it's how whatever problem or unfulfillment is showing up, right? But it's like something's there.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
something's there.
Gabor Mate has this really amazing phrase. Are you familiar
Yes.
with Gabor Mate? Yeah.
I
So
love
he,
yes.
yeah. And he has
Love
this amazing quote where he said, we shouldn't ask why the addiction, but why the pain. Like addiction is really the attempt to solve the problem. It's not the problem itself. And there's some
that.
underlying issue. And this is backed up by science. Are you familiar with the rat park experiment?
Only in that you've referenced it, but no, but
Okay.
explain to only
I'll
because
explain it.
I was studying you before. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll explain it briefly because it's one of the most impactful studies in addiction. So back in the 60s and 70s, they were really interested in addiction. And so they started studying addiction using rats as a model. And so for one of these studies, they put rats in these cages and they put a bottle of water with morphine in the bottle. And so these
Okay.
rats would get addicted to the morphine water and they would sit there and drink the morphine water and not do anything else. They wouldn't exercise or run around or eat. And they just got so addicted that they essentially died and collapsed.
Mm.
And it showed just how powerful addiction is, that you can really get so addicted that it can be lethal, even fatal. But what was really interesting is this one researcher had this really interesting insight. And they said, well, these rats are living in these pretty miserable conditions in these cages. They don't have other rats to play with. They're not, in a natural environment. What if we first got them addicted to the morphine water and then we put them in something like a rat park where there's other rats to play with, there's running wheels that they can go on, there's greenery that they can, run around in, and it kind of mimics a more natural environment. So they got them addicted to the morphine water and then put them in the rat park. And they found out that the rats barely touched the morphine water after that. That when they were living a life that was more fulfilling and more natural and they had their needs met, addiction didn't have the same pull anymore. And they could have the
Oh.
availability of that right there, but they had no pull to it. They were free from the inside. And what that shows us is that addiction is about when you aren't getting your needs met, when you're living in an unfulfilled way, when you don't have what you need in your life, that's when we reach out for addiction. And that if you want to solve the addiction problem, it's not about stopping the substance because you'll just find a new substance, particularly in our society. What you need to actually do is address the root of the issue. Look at where's the addiction coming from. And so that's
Mm.
what the Unhooked program is about. That's, the work I do is not about, hey, stop watching porn. It's, hey, make your life so amazing and so fulfilling that you don't want to look at porn, that it doesn't have the same pull over you.
Yes. Gosh, that was so well said. There's so many clips that are gonna be happening from this. Like, the way you're articulating it is so it's why it's so great is because it's, like, science-backed. It's you've understood as someone who struggled with it, you coach people, like, it just makes sense. Everything you're saying makes sense why people would be addicted, which then kind of is like, "Okay, don't be ashamed if you are, but there's a way out." There and it's literally
Exactly.
like, I love what your podcast, Unhooked, right? The courses, and what I love is, like, it's not just no porn, it's unhooked, probably from the feeling that is causing you to do that or whatever behavior that's not serving you well, right?
Exactly.
I'm
It's
having
not
so many
it's not even
moments
about
right now.
porn. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm just like, "Phew."
Yeah.
It
Well, and
makes so
that's what's
much
beautiful.
sense.
It's all of us. I mean, we all have this drive in us to escape pain, to run away from
Yep,
unpleasant emotions, and we all have
yep,
coping mechanisms that aren't serving us. We all sometimes watch a little too much Netflix or eat a little too much
sure,
food that isn't healthy for us or run
yep.
away from the difficult conversations and procrastinate on the things we should be doing. And that is, it's all of us and there's nothing wrong with it. And our life is served by addressing it head on and saying, oh, maybe I need to learn how to actually lean into the discomfort and not run away from it.
Mm,
Same with boredom. I mean, that's a huge one. It's like a lot of us don't know how to be with boredom and we run
yes,
away from it to the detriment of our own happiness with this kind of frenetic, constant, I need to be stimulated. I need to be stimulated. And if you can learn how
yeah,
to lean into the discomfort and just say, okay, let me be bored, that's when curiosity comes and deeper insights and all kinds of things happen when you lean into the discomfort.
mm.
And that's a skill that you can build through meditation. You
It
know,
it
it's,
it's
yeah.
I love it, and I'm literally like, I'm gonna have to have a part 2 and part 3 because I was gonna, like, go into all the, like, the Buddhist monk time and, like but there's just too much goodness here where my nerdy psychology brain and then just all the things that I wanna talk to you about. But, time flies, right? We're already at an hour here. But how I want to wrap up, if it's okay with you. Given all that we've just talked about, can you describe how you are helping men one on one, in groups, through courses, through videos, through all the things? How are you helping them on the journey towards becoming unhooked?
Mhm. Yeah.
And where and they're gonna look in the show notes for all the stuff, but if you were to just if someone's listening and they're like, "I'm thinking this might help me, but, like, what does he offer? What is he doing?" Yeah.
Yeah. So if you wanna get connected, I mean, there's a lot of ways, you can follow my podcast. There's a lot of free resources I post on there. I also have an email series for a slip reset. If you're kind of in and out of slipping and acting out, you can download the free slip reset for that. But if you want to actually take it to the next level and get engaged and really start doing the work, so I do this work with the community. It's called Unhooked Academy. There's courses in there, curriculum, journaling exercises to learn about, the deeper work, the meditation techniques, the envisioning practices that are helpful, understanding these questions around what leads to deeper fulfillment and happiness. But a big component of that is also the calls with the community. The being in community with other guys who are going through this, learning how to let go of the
Mhm.
shame you have around it, learning how to be seen and be vulnerable and get support and
Yeah.
be held accountable. I mean, the community work is a big, big component. Being held accountable. A lot of guys just act out because there's no accountability. It's just, well, who's going to know? What difference does it make? I'll
Yeah.
just keep acting out. It's easier to just escape responsibility in that way. And so the community is there is to provide some structure and support and accountability. And that's really the work we do. I also do work with guys one on one. So that's an
Okay.
option that I have as well. If people want, more direct one on one contact with me, I also do that too.
Yeah. So cool. And I gotta say, I was listening to your podcast a couple episodes before, and then some of your YouTube videos, and I just wanna commend you on how authentic you are and, like, how there's just a feeling of a mix of, like, accountability, but without the shaming and judgment, and I just wanna
Mm.
commend you for that because it's just it's refreshing, 'cause, there's a lot of, like, finger pointing in our culture and, like, "Don't do that, and you're bad, and you're this," and it's like, how
Yeah.
about that doesn't really work? So
Right. Yeah. There's people out there who are like, "You're not a real man if you watch porn," and it's just like it's so toxic on the other end. Like you can be toxic on one end of like, "There's nothing wrong with
yeah,
porn, and porn's great. I love," and there's also the toxicity of like, "You're not a real man if you keep watching," and it's so, black and white, and there's no kind of understanding that, hey, these things are difficult, and it's okay to
yeah,
struggle, and it's okay to slip up, and it's the thing I really believe in my program. It's like if you slip, it's okay. Like a lot of the one of the big issues I see is a guy will get really motivated, to break free from porn and they'll have a good start to it. And then they'll slip up and they think, oh, I'm a failure. I watched porn again. And so let me just isolate and not go to any
yeah,
calls and because I'm just broken. And it's like, that's the wrong approach. It's like, if you slip, it's okay. Get back up, keep trying,
yeah,
keep moving forward. And that's where you'll see success.
yeah, it's that self-compassion, right?
Hmm.
Like, you have to have it. Gosh, I am so glad that you came on the show and that this is coming out on that we're doing this on the last day of Mental Health Awareness Month, but that it's going live. I mean, I'm in favor of mental health all year round, but I just love that this is going to be posted during Men's Mental Health Awareness because, I just feel like this is such a gift for somebody like you to who's been through it and to really just be like, "Hey, I'm gonna facilitate a program that breaks people from that shame, but also it's just what we need. It's what we need, And I think about I have a son who's 10 years old, and I just think about what he's going through, and then I'm like, "Okay,"
Mhm.
and then I have a daughter, and I'm like and then just as a parent, I'm like, "Okay, how can we just have these conversations and, like, if they've seen it, not shame them, but, like, how do there's just it's bringing up so much, and I'm so grateful that you have, you know, just dedicated your life to drawing awareness to this. Because a lot of people just are like, "No, I'm not gonna do that. It's too weird or awkward, and I'm not gonna," and it's just not the way that the world needs to be, where we're, like, hiding these issues. So,
Yeah.
really appreciate it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thanks for having me on. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, no, and I know we could talk for hours about all the things, but, I wanted to thank you, and again, guys, go into the show notes, and if there's women listening too, and you're having some issues with it, no shame there, right? And I think it's just an awareness too of knowing that we all have stuff that we're struggling with, and there's resources available. So,
Yeah.
Jeremy, thank you again, and, I would love to stay connected. And, just thank you for your honesty and for the work that you're doing.
My pleasure. Happy to come on anytime and do a part two and part three.
We're going to have to because I'm gonna need to nerd out on, like, the Buddhist part and the psychology, and we're just scratching the surface here, so alright, well, we'll wrap it up, and, hopefully you guys will be getting in contact with Jeremy if you're struggling. There's a community out there that can support you. So, with that, I will close it up and, take care. Alright.